Hi, my name is Karina Akidal. I'm the managing editor of Canadian Auto Dealer, and I'm here with Madison Gross of CarGurus. Madison, I understand that the company has prepared a consumer sentiment study for COVID-19. Maybe you can give us a little bit of details on what exactly that covered and what was really the key takeaway, the highlight, or the most surprising fact, in fact, of that study.
Sure. So throughout 2020, we've surveyed over 1,500 Canadian car shoppers on their sentiments towards car shopping during the pandemic. And our most recent iteration was in November, but we had prior ones in the spring and in the summer, so we can benchmark sentiments over time. People who responded to the survey were either pandemic buyers, meaning that they bought between March and November of this year, or they are current shoppers who are planning to buy this year or next but haven't done so yet. So to start to talk a little bit about the takeaways, I think really the most surprising thing that we see is that while we certainly continue to see people delaying their purchases, often due to financial concerns or concerns about the economy in general, we also see a number of shoppers entering the market who hadn't planned to before the pandemic. In fact, a quarter of people who bought this year hadn't planned to buy before the pandemic happened in March. And this is, there's a few reasons, maybe because people are relying more on their vehicles versus other sources of transportation like ride sharing or public transportation. But also because vehicles have offered people a bit of an escape from pandemic restrictions, a way that they can travel more safely and kind of experience more outside of their homes.
And so maybe we can extend on other key takeaways, things that cover inventory, affordability, digital retail, and even ride sharing and public transport. What did the survey kind of pull out from those areas?
Yeah, I'll start with the impact of inventory. Between the closure of in-person auctions, drop off in trades as sales slowed early on in the pandemic, many consumers choosing to extend their leases rather than but going out and buying a car during all of this. We've seen wholesale levels fall in Canada, and we see the impact of that in consumer sentiments. In particular, shoppers are quite open right now on both make, with over half considering more than one different make, and even type of vehicle. Over a quarter of Canadian shoppers are considering more than one type of vehicle. We've also seen with that lower inventory some pressure on pricing. And these affordability challenges are also causing an increased interest in financing versus what we were seeing before the pandemic. It was around 50% who had intended to finance before the pandemic, and just around 60% who now report that they plan to or already did finance their purchase. So certainly, dealers feel the inventory constraints, but consumers do too. I think the good news for dealers is that it's making consumers a little bit more open, which gives dealers a few options for how to find a car that will match what a customer needs, even if it's maybe not the exact car that they had in mind to start. The other topic that I think we can talk about a little bit is really what the new normal of shopping looks like. When we first did this study in April, over half of people thought that normal activity, whatever that meant, would resume by October. So here we are, it's December, things are obviously not quite back to normal. And in our most recent study, around 90% of people said that it will be quite a while until things go back to normal, or that they might not, that some of the new ways of shopping, like contactless services, like click and collect, will continue even after the pandemic. So dealers who can introduce contactless services, offerings like a test drive at home, for example, or a private dealer appointment that has less contact, but not none, they have room to to shine by adapting to these changing consumer needs.
Now, is there any other, are there any other bits of advice that you can offer them based on what you've seen in the study?
Yeah, so I'll start with that. I am always impressed with dealers' ability to adapt. I've worked in the industry for a while. I was here for the Great Recession and saw dealers do some really incredible things to stay afloat and change their business models so that it worked. And I think we've seen the same thing so far this year from dealers. But I would add that some of these services that consumers are interested in, like private dealer appointments, like test drives at home, like a virtual or a video tour of the vehicle, I think are really critical pieces for consumers to feel confident in the quality and reliability of a vehicle, while the more traditional dealership visit and test drive feels uncomfortable to folks. That's just a really important decision-making factor for consumers when they're shopping for cars. So I think that's one way that dealers can adapt. And I largely expect some of those things to stick around even after the pandemic. So it's not only short-term work to make those changes. I think it'll pay out in the long term as well. The other thing I would offer is, consumers are interested in doing parts of the process online. Over half of Canadian car shoppers would prefer to do financing and price negotiation online. So it's one more way that dealers can work with consumers in a way that makes them feel safe, but also confident enough to move forward with the purchase.
Perfect. And so just to close up the session, when do you foresee your next study coming out, or are you working on it right now? What's coming up in the pipeline?
Sure. So we typically do an annual shopper journey study in the fall. We've got that one wrapping up now and we'll be ready to share in the first quarter. We've included many of the same types of topics as we did in this study. And then we'll keep an eye out. We do a number of studies over the course of the year, responding to what we see in the world around us. So I might hope that it's not too long until we've rounded a corner and COVID sentiment is no longer the hot topic of the day, but until then, we'll continue to keep a pulse.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to this interview, and I wish you and your family good health and safety during this period.
Thank you, and same to you.